everybody. My name is Sam Weeks. I'm a full-time admissions consultant, and I am also founder of Sam Weeks Consulting. And one of our most recent joiners is Jon Cheng, who was a former admissions evaluator at Haas and has been working with me over the last couple of months over this round of applications, helping people get admitted to top business schools. And so today I am with Jon to try and decipher some of the common queries and some of the issues facing applicants in this MBA application season. Jon, lovely to have you here.
Thanks, Sam. Really excited to be here with you today. Happy to introduce myself. I'm Jon.
Go for it.
I'm here with Sam Weeks. I think the best way to describe my background and myself is storytelling. I've built my career around helping everyone from big brands to startups to individuals tell their best stories. Before I pursued my MBA at Haas, I was a brand consultant at Ogilvy, the biggest advertising agency in the world. I was also a professional writer for many publications, newspapers and magazines many of you are maybe familiar with. When I was pursuing my MBA at Haas, and for years before that, beyond that, I was both an admissions reader and interviewer to hundreds of applicants. It was an enriching and eye-opening experience that I would totally do again, but I didn't really like being that gatekeeper. I didn't like turning away applicants, many of whom I thought were qualified for admissions. And so turned my efforts towards helping them get in, and that's where I am today.
That's brilliant. And how do you think that experience at Haas has affects your work with clients? How do you apply that experience with clients?
I think building a sense of empathy is paramount. When you're reading an application, the scan of the essay is 3 minutes, maybe 4. Sometimes you yearn to get a better understanding of the applicant through their essays, but you're not really getting it. And so when I work with clients and I see that essay and I turn on my admissions and then say, hey, if I were the admissions evaluator, I wouldn't understand what your purpose in life is. Something like that.
So you're bringing a combination of the writing skills with knowing what the reader is looking for.
Correct.
Yeah, it's awesome. Okay, and when you are doing profile evaluations as an admissions consultant now, so you're in your new world and you're meeting a new client for the first time, what are some of the key things that you're looking for when you meet a client, when you meet an applicant, to understand, are their chances realistic? Are their schools realistic? Is their profile something that I can work with?
And this goes back to your prior question, Sam, about how that translates working with clients. So whenever it's a client or whenever it's someone I evaluate on paper during the admissions process, I really want to try to understand what they stand for, right? There's a misconception that applicants need to tailor and pander their applications to the applications committee. In some ways, there are different elements that schools value over others. But at the end of the day, it's about showing up authentically. And so some of my first questions that I ask clients, beyond the academics is, what do you want to get out of the MBA experience? Where do you see yourself, immediately after post-MBA? Sure, that's important for what you state in your goals in your essay, but ultimately, who do you want to be? So, yes, when I do a profile evaluation, academics, professional experience are all table stakes. Scores within range of the school, demographics come into play, of course, right? If you're coming from a certain country, part of a certain demographic, there are certain score bands that schools are looking for, unfortunately. When it comes to professional experience, how quickly were you promoted? Do you have the requisite leadership experience? How do you stand out among your peers? Things like that. When I talk about purpose in life, I also want to earmark it. I want to make sure that your goals are credible and achievable. Given your background, how feasible is it for you to transition into something like VC? I've seen a lot of people say they want to become venture capitalists, and how difficult
Classic.
it is to break into, right, Sam? And the same is true for some really niche industries. the classic adage, same function or same industry, pivot there is usually a safe bet. There are exceptions, of course, but and then on the opposite side of the token, if you can clearly achieve your goal, why do you need an MBA to get there? So trying to suss out people's goals basis where they are currently, that I think is the most important part when you start with a profile evaluation process.
Yeah. Yeah. What would you do then if somebody came to you and said, I want to be a consultant, and there's nothing on their resume that says, that screams consultant? How do you tackle that client?
So what I always tell clients is that what you say on paper is not necessarily what you'll end up doing. I have read applications of applicants who say that they want to go into things that perfectly make sense with their profile, but a year later they're pursuing an internship in McKinsey or doing a banking internship somewhere. Schools don't hold that against you, right? You can say whatever you want on paper as long as it makes sense. Where we try and reconcile this process is trying to figure out a short-term goal that may make sense for the client and one that they feel comfortable pursuing. And your long-term goal can be something a little bit more far out. Right? If you do want to move into an entrepreneurship, if you do want to move into consulting, something a little far out, that's fine. But schools usually care about that immediate MBA goal more than your long-term goal. The long-term goal is usually a signal of, again, what you care about, what your purpose is, what drives you, your North Star, etc.
Yeah, I think in my experience, there is some value also to having something that you're genuinely passionate about as your post-MBA goals. Trying to convey passion for something that you're not really interested in. You might be able to do it with a well-refined essay, but in an interview, are you going to ooze enthusiasm? Possibly not. So interesting balance. Okay, tell me about Haas. So before working as while and before working as an admissions evaluator there, you did your MBA at Berkeley Haas. Mm-hmm. Tell me about that experience. What did you really like about it? And what would you say could be improved?
I think what's unique about Haas is its small class size. People talk about small class sizes a lot and its utility, but it's just small enough where you if you don't know that person, you at least know of that person, and that's critical if after the first year you're trying to figure out if there are individuals in your outside your cohort who you want to make connections with, both socially and professionally. I think what's unique about Haas is it's almost like a symphony orchestra, right? There's almost a player for every different function. Sometimes there are multiple players within the same function, but for the most part, despite its class size sub 300, maybe between 250 and 300, there's someone for everyone. And I think that's what's so unique about Haas. And they really pride themselves on, you've probably heard this before, the defining leadership principles. And it's not just talking through their mouth and just saying, they are really serious about attracting students who fulfill, a few or more, or maybe all of those buckets. And so as you meet people in the class, many of them may be in completely different functions, completely different backgrounds, but they're all united by this common thread of laddering up to these individual leadership principles. And so showing that in your essays and applications is so important, but not showing it in a way that sounds inauthentic, right? I've seen cases where people just say, I exhibit this principle and that principle. And it's like you're trying to tell the admissions committee what they want to hear without showing it. The best way to do it is to show it without even saying those words.
Do you mind giving an example of that? I mean, maybe from your own application or somebody you've worked with, or of a story maybe that demonstrates a certain leadership principle and how that got combined?
So a classic Haas defined leadership principle is beyond yourself, right? What lies out there beyond your end goal of your 9 to 5 and advancing yourself in an organization, right? So it may come in the form of charitable pursuits as extracurriculars. It may come in the form of your goal. It may come in the form of some little things that you do at work to help your coworkers. And people often just double down and just say, I like to go beyond myself in 5 ways. And it's getting a little bit too specific, and it's getting a little bit too, you're pandering too much to admissions committee. Right. So, and it's not, I wouldn't say that's a specific example, Sam, but it's just an example of how people just tend to take words from the website and regurgitate them in their essays and hope, some of these words will light up in the eyes of the committee. But the more powerful way is to show exactly that throughout your application without saying those words.
Tell a story of a time when you went beyond. Rather than saying, than saying I did it. Yeah. Okay. And then the flip side of that same question is what you said a small class size you really, really enjoyed. What was something that you think could be improved or is being improved at Berkeley Haas?
I think what's unique about Berkeley Haas is that it's such a small class, but within a very, very large, arguably one of the biggest university ecosystems in the US, right? You have an enrollment class, don't fact check me on this, but something like 30 to 35,000 students every year, right? And Berkeley has such a small subset of that. So finding ways to integrate Haas into the larger university ecosystem, right? We have our economics professors within the business school, but they're also Nobel laureates working in the economics department at Berkeley proper. And the professors at Haas are terrific, but finding ways for students to be involved outside just that is where Haas continues to provide value, and I think that's something that will improve over time.
Yeah, interesting, really good point. It was similar at Oxford, by the way. So, as having graduated now from Haas, looking back at the experience. Can you point to any examples of anybody who didn't really get the most out of their MBA and maybe why that might have been?
I think, and this is common for most business school, but especially for Haas, is those people who operate as lone wolves. And you can't be a lone wolf in business school. You need to rely on your network to help you, and vice versa, giving your time and expertise to the rest of the network. The adage is, if I have a high GMAT score and nail the case interview, I'm going to get that interview at an MBB regardless, and that's all I want to do, right? And so that defeats the purpose of a business school, and that defeats the purpose of a school like Haas, where it's almost like it's almost like an orchestra, right? You can be a damn good player in a violin section, but if you're not playing in unison, if you're not integrating yourself with the rest of the section, you're not really providing any value beyond just yourself, which is exactly why Haas prides itself on those defining leadership principles, right? It's not just going beyond yourself. It's also about, being a student always, whether that's, continuing to push your level of learning, push yourself outside your comfort zone, and doing that in the context of a larger team and a larger group.
So you set up my next question perfectly. Talking about doing your work within a large group, can you walk through the application process for clients that you're working with, how that process looks, and then how you leverage the rest of the team, me and others in the team, to get the most value for applicants?
Yeah. So I spend a lot of time getting to know my applicants. It starts with usually an exercise, and that takes up an inordinate amount of time, hours usually, to understand their purpose. And I keep saying purpose, but it's a real thing that we pride ourselves in. What is their North Star? Which I know is very Simon Sinek-y, but the approach really works because, like brand purpose or a brand idea, everything flows from it like a ladder, right? I follow my approach as a journalist, and I've been in this trade for 15 years. And I interview my clients to abandon. I ask them all kinds of questions. Some of the questions may just be not relevant for not immediately relevant for the MBA process or the application process, but it really gets me to understand the little things that drive the client forward. This initial profiling really helps give us a clear picture of who our applicants and what they stand for. That translates to an exercise called the SCAR analysis, which is really just a tool to organize pivotal moments that address different attributes that schools look for across different periods of their lives and career. For instance, what is a time when you took a risk? When you were in the early stages of your career? When was a time you made a mistake or failed when you were pursuing your undergraduate studies, right? That really helps give fodder for anything from the essay to the resume to the interviews and so forth. Only after that's done is when we work on the essays and the resume and so forth. And then to your question about collaboration, Sam, I think what makes our partnership so successful is our shared philosophy of knowing that even expert opinion can be subjective, right? I believe in our abilities to pool our expertise together. So that means 2 sets of eyes on essays, 2 sets of ears for interviews. Clients really value that duality, even more so for someone like myself who doesn't know your client, Sam, if I interview them, and likewise. The way that we work is just so collaborative. Whether it's a phone call to ask, hey, what do you think about this part in the essay? What do you think about that?
Yeah. And as you pointed to, interviews, massive factor. Mock interviews with somebody that you've already worked with during your applications, that's one thing. But mock interviews with when I ask my clients to go to work with you and vice versa, mock interviews with people who you've never met, you get that authentic, fresh interview experience. So that's another example of extra value coming from having more people on the team. Yeah, I love it. Okay, tell me about any trends that you're seeing in the MBA application world.
Yeah, I'm seeing a rise in international applicants, especially some of the T15 schools like Cornell. I think MBA remains an attractive option, especially for those outside the US who wish to pivot to a career in the US. And I'm also seeing a rise in less traditional MBA programs, like the tech MBA programs at Cornell, NYU, Columbia's J-term has been a popular option as well, and some of the one-year programs at schools like Kellogg.
Interesting. And what do you think is driving that? You think it's to do with the economy?
I think so. I think the 1 year versus 2 years are an attractive option for people who want to maybe enter into an industry quicker, just given how quickly the industry is evolving. And it's just less of a commitment. Not to say that it doesn't give the same, not that a 2 year MBA is not a commitment. It's just timing wise, people want to be more efficient with advancing.
Yeah, fair. Okay, let's talk about schools. You've had first-hand experience applying and interviewing at heaps of different schools. Can you walk through how you perceive, just very high level, how you perceive the different top American schools?
Yeah, so everyone's experience is different, Sam. So what I'm about to share, don't take it as gospel. I'm pretty sure many of these, though, will resonate and have been reinforced by some of my clients who interviewed at these schools. Across the board, of course, schools are looking for academics. Those are table stakes. You need to have a good GPA, preferably at range or higher than the stated means for those schools. And the same goes for your GMAT scores and for your GMAT and GRE test scores as well. Equally, I think it's also the professional experience that really matters, right? Is it a brand name organization? Did you do impactful work? How quickly were you promoted? Beyond those, there are obviously nuances by school, and I'm happy to walk through those.
Let's do that.
So with Tuck, Tuck is a small remote school, in not a very popular, well, I wouldn't say popular, it's just less populated area in New Hampshire. And so for that reason, the nearest city is Boston, is like 2 hours away. So to be able to be at Tuck and fit in with the culture, you need to be very willing to give your time to others. And so Tuck really prides itself on attracting students who are nice. So who really pride themselves on going beyond themselves to help others, just having an all around positive attitude. And so that's what Tuck likes to see in their application as well as during their interviews. That's why they get second year students to interview, just to see, can I see the student at my school? Can I see them genuinely interested in spending 2 years in a remote area with a small class? So that's Tuck. With HBS, it's about really defending your opinion to the finish, right? It's a lot of the interview questions are getting to the why behind things that you do, even if you're wrong. They want to see people who are strong-willed, but also lean on others where appropriate. So in actuality, in essence, basically showing that you are a strong leader and you have the mantle to lead. That you're an expert in the field. I was actually asked about during my interview, just given my background in brand consulting, the interviewer was like, well, we're transitioning from HBX to HBS online. Please walk me through all the branding considerations. And is it a good idea for us to do that? And so it sounds like a case question, right, Sam? But the point is to show, even if what I say may not be tracking their direction, is to show that I am an expert in my field and I know how to defend my opinion. The post-interview essay for HBS is probably one of the most nerve-wracking things I've ever wrote. And I'm pretty sure it's the same for many of those who interview. So be prepared for that.
And we have several applicants this year in the process of doing that. And so for viewers, what we do with our mock interviews for HBS is after the mock interview that you do with me or with John or any other member of the team, is you will be sending out, you'll be required, I will say, okay, I want you to send a post-interview reflection to me right after this interview, exactly as HBS will ask. As you say, it's very, very nerve-wracking. Maybe a little bit less nerve-wracking if you've done it once or twice or more with a consultant, with your consultant beforehand. Awesome. So that's HBS. Let's talk about Kellogg. Thoughts on Kellogg?
Yeah. Kellogg is a very all-rounded school. You can be, what's interesting about it is that you can be interviewed by anyone. There, right? Yeah, I did interview there. You can be interviewed by a student. You can be interviewed by an alum. You can be interviewed by someone who works for admissions. And so you need to show and tailor sometimes your interview to who you interview with. And that includes the questions you ask at the end, right? Kellogg, they pride themselves on students who are a little bit more social, I would say, than a school like Booth. So it's all about not just social in a social setting, but how you show up in a team, right? It's important that you provide value and not exhibit that lone wolf tendency that I talked about earlier during this interview. So showing interest, showing that you are always ready to lean on others for support. That's what's going to be really important for a successful Kellogg interview and generally an application.
Yeah. And I can, and just like with talking about TARC and talking about HBS, though the clients that I've seen that have been successful got into Kellogg have been some of the most collaborative, nicest people that I've ever worked with, and haven't got an ounce of lone wolf syndrome in them. Exactly, corroborating exactly what you say. Okay, you also applied to Fuqua?
I did. I applied, interviewed. I was admitted. Fuqua is actually quite similar to Kellogg in many respects. You need to be social. You need to know how to work in a team. Their mantra, Team Fuqua, is so important, right? So articulating how you collaborate in the essay and the interview is so important. During the interview, I was actually asked in multiple ways what my role is in the team and what I like to do for fun. So it just goes to show you how importantly they value that. I was interviewed by a second year student as well. So that's Fuqua, and I think lastly there's Booth as well.
Let's talk about Booth.
Yeah. So Booth is, it's the other Chicago school. Well, technically Kellogg's in Evanston, but it's not too far away. Um, what Booth likes to see is passion, substantive passion, things that you're really good at. It's sometimes they sometimes get a reputation of being nerdy or data driven, and that's to some extent may be true, but it's more so about, again, being an expert in your field. They want people who can contribute something very tangible to the class. And they also want applicants who really want to go to Booth. And so they really tend to double down on the why Booth question. One of my former clients said that during the interview, the why Booth question was asked in three different ways during the same interview. So it's almost like maybe it's a yield thing. I don't know, but I think it's important that you show passion for the school as well.
For sure. It's funny you say that. It's clearly something that really is really important to them. Fantastic. Right. Well, on that note then, Jon, thank you very, very much for your time. Thank you very much for sharing this wisdom. And thank you to the viewers. Thank you for watching. If you would like to meet Jon or myself to talk about your MBA applications, feel free to get in touch. You can go to samweeks.com and book a free meeting with either of us via the schedule a free meeting link on the website. And we would be more than happy to spend 20 minutes, half an hour, talking about your profile, talking about your chances at various schools. And for Jon to share his experience applying to all of these different schools that we have talked about. And so, Jon, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks, everyone.
Take care.